to go ahead and run through the update and delete, which is fairly simple. So on an update, which should be a put, again, we have a path, and we have something that consumes application JSON. Update is simply path parameter, and the new user create. More so. And we don't consume anything. Nothing to do. Nothing to process, rather. Do your path frame again. There you go. Yep. Should almost all work.
Getting settings JSON in terms of setting it in. And see how you specify the section. Where in your code did you say this user JSON?
When the question is how do I specify how my user is being sent? That's here. Type.
Okay.
Type application JSON there. Retrieve and update. Type application JSON. That's been failing from the beginning. What do they call it? Roles. Okay, so our non-existent user test is failing, and our delete test is still failing. Well, that's expected kind of because if you remember, we defined it in terms of the retrieve. And this is where I was talking earlier about tests kind of rolling down. So an earlier failing test can potentially impact a later failing test. So you always start at the top. Did I skip this one earlier because it needed the update and delete implemented anyway because we kind of backtracked and changed it? We're going to go back and fix that now, and everybody should be happy. So on a get, we said that we're talking error path now. This is the last part of the presentation, or this part of the presentation. There's more kind of optional content we go to if you guys want to. The last one I'm going to show you is error handling. So we did a little bit of kind of error handling up here. Says if the user already exists for return format. So now the question is, if there's not a user, then what we do? Well, up here we have the flexibility. We had defined this method in terms of returning a response, which is that's a JAX-RS class from Java XWS-RS package. Our getUser method though returns a user. So if you're looking at each of these methods in isolation, one is a little bit cleaner than the other. Get is cleaner, and in fact, if you look at it and just kind of mask this stuff out, it's really just a plain Java method. And this is perfectly unit testable. You could instantiate one of these classes and call that method and test the results and everything tests. In practice, that's not as useful as it sounds like, sometimes anyway, unless you have really complex logic in there, because a lot of times what you really want to test is that you got these things right too. So that this says I did a get, and I pulled the ID from the URI, and I can produce JSON XML. So these things are really things you want to test. But on the other hand, there's something to be said for the ability to keep your method definitions clean and clear of any outside libraries. So let's kind of explore that a little bit. The first way that I can say user by name doesn't contain that key. Jersey can use exceptions to signal errors, obviously. Pretty natural. You're in Java, so exceptions, errors, right? Jersey ships with a runtime, an unchecked exception hierarchy rooted at web application exception. So we can say throw a new web application exception, say, outbound. Okay? So again, this is unchecked, so we don't have to account for the method signature. So you've got a tie to Jersey in this class of code, but at least classes that were outside of this wouldn't have to know specifically about that exception. And what happens is that this is kind of a magical exception that when it gets out to the Jersey container, it knows to map it to some status, which is this, unbound. This constructor also allows quite a bit of other things. You can put a full response in it, like we've been doing up here, where we built a whole 409 response, or a created response. You can fully express your response, the entity, the content type, and all that stuff in here, or you do status. You can also chain other exceptions to it. You've got the throwable cause with all of the other options here. So this is one way. Now we need the same kind of thing for the update, but do it a little bit different. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do this in real code. Do it differently every time. Kind of the purpose here is to learn a few things. So, if the users by name doesn't contain the ID in the case of the update, there's also a specific subclass of the web application exception that's a not found exception, which you can just give with no parameters that will turn into not found, or you can say no user name ID. So there's another way. Now the final option is the one that gives you the most flexibility, and you're probably going to be most interested in, especially when you start thinking in terms of this is just the API layer, and there would be other, like service layers or other modules underneath supporting it, and you definitely don't want to be pushing Jersey exceptions down into the guts of your application, right? So the final option, and like I said, potentially the most useful and interesting, is we can take just any arbitrary business exception, say throw you new user give the ID flash. That exception doesn't exist yet. Let's create it. There we go. And we'll say have a message of no user. Okay. So there's our exception. Pretty simple, because it's appear anywhere in your code, right? Down in any layer, get pushed up through a number of layers, and we'll make this run that exception so not have to put that down. And now we can throw that out of here, and the way that we deal with it is what's called, we'll get there. We need a mapper, an exception mapper. By convention, exception mappers are named by the exception name and mapper afterwards. This is an implementation of an interface provided one method which takes in our exceptions and lets us build a response on it. So we can say, for instance, turn on status 404, put an entity in it that's the exception message, and that's it. One thing that my notes always remind me of, always forget it, this is the provider. That means that it provides some service to the JAX-RS server, to the Jersey server. So there are a few different types of things you can use provider on. Exception mapper is one of them. another thing is that the provider is also how you would plug in custom marshalling strategies. There's a message body reader and writer that you can make providers to give yourself when you're signing other types or using other XML or JSON marshalling libraries.